Hello everyone and welcome to the third video of my channel on KBT Football, where I discuss everything mainly Sunderland AFC at the moment. We'll see if things gradually move on to any other areas of football or other things at the moment, but for now, yes, it is just about Sunderland. So I promised in the last video that I would take you through what Sunderland's current playing squad looks like and basically just my overview of the players we've got mainly available to us at the moment, what I think their strengths and as well as if I think there's anything that they can improve on, and just generally an overview of how important I think they can be for our club in the future. We've got quite a few players to get through. I'm only going to stick to players who I believe have got a reasonable possibility of playing much competitive domestic football for the first team or European football for the first team this season. So I won't be I won't be discussing in heavily a lot of under 21 players, although there is one or two there that I have thrown in, which I will do a little bit of talking about during the thing. I'm aware that some of these players will be leaving as I'm talking about them, and I'll talk about that. Anyway, so there's quite a few to get through. So my idea is I will likely go to the midfield, go from the goalkeeper down to the midfield area. But it is possible that I'll decide to leave it to another video where I'll discuss then wingers and forwards and stuff like that and etc. So I've went through positions and I'm doing each position in alphabetical order from their name. So the first player on there is Anthony Patterson. I think Anthony Patterson he's an absolutely great goalkeeper. Alex Neil recalled him on loan from Notts County when we're on loan in League One. He was absolutely brilliant in helping us get promotion that year from League One. I think in general he was solid throughout our entire time in the Championship. There was a couple of occasions where I don't think his decision making was perfect, or the lack of decision making the decision to come out and try and claim balls was the main criticism I really saw of him. But I think in general, and although he's extremely, possibly too reluctant to try take any risks with the ball from the back, I do think he was actually fairly good at the kicking part of it, and also he's a brilliant shot stopper and a goalkeeper at his age. I think he's 25 now. He has still got a really big future ahead of him, and he is not a player that I necessarily be chasing out the door either. And I don't think that is what we're doing, and I don't think that's what we should do. But yeah, I mean, I'm hearing some of the fees getting talked about that Sunderland are demanding for his exit. And I think they're about fair, really. I think some of the offers we've had so far are a little bit on the lower side, and I can absolutely see him being a keeper who can perform in the Premier League in the future. But I think it's unlikely at this point that that's where his permanent move would be to. Right, so that takes me on to the next player, which is Melker Elborg. I haven't seen that much of Melker Elborg, to be honest. We brought him in last January, mainly due to the departure of Patterson on loan to Millwall, but also as a long-term investment for the future. He seems like a really good goalkeeper. We saw him for a few games in the Premier League as well as Cups, and then the York City game just on the Saturday gone. I think, in general, he looks like a pretty solid keeper. He didn't hit the ground impressing to the level of Roofs did, but that would be an extremely tall order to expect someone to be able to do. I think he looks fairly decent aerially in his ability to command his box. I think looks like a very good shot stopper, just like I said about Patterson, and I'd say the same about Roofs. I don't think he's particularly. I'm not particularly worried about him in terms of when it comes to him playing out from the back. I think there was a little bit of concern, especially I think people noted after the Newcastle game of that his decision to pass the ball to Luke O'Nien in that position when it possibly looked like the right thing to do was to do something else, or it looked like he was going to do something else. But I think we've got to remember that a 22-year-old player coming into the Premier League and one of the most senior members of the dressing room, you know, just asks for the ball to be laid to him. In Elborg's eyes, it wasn't probably a high risk thing to do, and he probably didn't entirely know what Luke O'Nien intended to do with that ball. Um, and they're one of the mistakes that happen over the course of the season. But in general, low cost investment. Seems like a player with really high potential. He's already been called up for the Sweden international squad, which isn't easy. So no, I think we've got a decent keeper on our hands there, and it'll be, I hope in some competitions he gets the opportunity to put in some good performances and challenge Roofs for that number one spot. And that obviously takes us on to Robin Roofs. Now, this man has surprised me so much because I like to think as well at Sunderland, despite in my time supporting them as having a lot of low points, we've always had, apart from the time when we were in League One and the first time we got relegated to the Championship in 2017, I think we have had quite a lot of keepers that have been beloved on our side and generally really good keepers. People like England number one, Jordan Pickford. We had a lot of success. We had a lot of success with the signing of Costel Pantilimon, albeit that was short lived. But yes, I think Robin Roofs, when he came in, he extended just the level of what I'd seen from goalkeepers in general. He is someone who, although he had a great deal of first team experience in the previous series, NEC Nijmegen in the Netherlands, but he was first of all his aerial claims. He is so brilliant at commanding his box for someone of his age and at knowing when to and when to not come out for the ball in general. And I think especially in the first half of the season, and I'd say in general there was only really 2 or 3 games, and I think it was when he came back from injury where there was a couple of little shakes in there, but he's more than passed the test for me for being a Premier League goalkeeper already, and I think most people will agree with me totally. He's a very good shot stopper. He is excellent, as I said, at punching balls out. When he goes for it, most players that go to challenge Robin Roofs for him to get the football out from his box with his hands are gonna be failing because he's exceptionally good at that. He's got a good leap on him and he keeps strong hands out there. I think he's fairly decent when it comes to his distribution as well. I think he's willing to take risks when he needs to. And I think the real way I measure him in general is the fact that whether or not I watch him and I think he should take a risk or not, he usually would prove me wrong even if I thought he was wrong. Because I've seen a lot of situations where I thought he might do something really risky, or I thought, oh, maybe you should try this, and he's done something else, and it's been very rare where I've really had to say, you've left us in a sticky one there, Robin. So it's not a major concern at all. For me, he is an absolutely brilliant player, and I think long term we have it's a challenge to Sunderland to keep proving to him that we're the project for him. I think he'd command a very large fee if he was to depart with our side. And I absolutely don't want that one bit because I think he's an excellent goalkeeper, so level-headed. And I think, to be honest with you, as a keeper, I think he could be destined for the very top of football. And hopefully that's with us. So I'm going to go on to centre-halves now. And Dan Ballard is the first person I'll go on to there. So obviously he was a £2 million signing from Arsenal a few seasons ago when we were in the first got promoted to the Championship, and we got what we saw from Dan Ballard. Really, he hit the ground running. He has had a few problems with injuries, especially hamstrings, in his time since he's been here. But he is fairly quick. He is an absolute rock at the back in terms of size. He is so strong, and you rarely see someone as aerially dominant as you see as Dan Ballard is. It gets to the point, and this was the same in the Championship, but it's literally carried on straight to the Premier League, where if Dan Ballard's on the pitch, it's very clear that when a lot of crosses come into our box and other people are focusing on markers and positional areas or players, Dan Ballard is the one that isn't necessarily marking a player. He is the one that is going there to win the ball. So other people are trying to annul other threats, and Ballard, as the best aerial player, which I think is the best way to approach it actually, is the one who goes out there, free reins, and attacks that ball and gets it out the box wherever it needs to be so it can go and do something else. And it is literally the same in the opposition's box. I think whatever type of corner routine would do, he's an integral part of it. Whether it's to hit a more direct corner for him to get a header on to try and score from it, or whether it's a back post looper for someone to flick down to move into the thing. He's an absolute chaos causer. He carries 2 or 3 players with him every time he's in the box. I think he's not excellent on the ball, but I think I'd be fair to say that he is definitely not poor. I think he's improved, clearly worked very hard in the off-season before we got to the Premier League. And I think he's a lot more tidier in possession now. And I actually think he's looked quicker as well and stuff since we got promoted to the Premier League. So yep, I think his passing's got a lot better. He's not necessarily a flair player, which is not necessarily, well, it's not at all what I care about for a centre back. Certainly at the stage we're in at the moment, and no, I think he's an absolutely brilliant player as well. And I really think we're probably a good club for him that can to continue his progression and see how far he can get at this mid stage of his career. So the next player I'll go on to is Jensen Seelt. Seelt is someone we signed a couple of seasons ago again. He's had a lot of injury problems since he joined us. I think we've got him from PSV Eindhoven. He, straight away when he came in, and I assumed this from the club he came from previously, to be fair, as a youth player, that he would be very strong on the ball, especially with his technique, his touch, and his passing. And I do think that is definitely true with him. I think between the Championship and the Premier League, he also was someone who worked very hard on his physicality and came back looking like an absolute man mountain, ready for last season. Due to players coming in and possibly his lack of first team experience, we decided to send him out on loan to Wolfsburg, which I'm not entirely sure, to be honest, how a lot of that went. I know he made a fair amount of appearances for them, and I certainly recall hearing good reviews, certainly from his early spell when he was there. The only issue I've ever seen with Jensen Seelt from a Sunderland point of view is, I'd say, the year when we were in the Championship, probably under Mike Dodds when he was playing the most. I think he was sometimes a little bit too relaxed on the ball. It was like someone where you need to give a little electric shock at times, where because he would trust his touch and his technique and his passing. And I did see this a little bit against York City as well, where I think he sometimes sees the game in a slightly different, possibly slightly more advanced way than some other players might in general. And he often tries to thread very progressive passes from deep, sometimes not quite, sometimes overestimating how long he's got on the ball, or the ability or the awareness of the player he's given the ball to anticipate that pass so they can then get it on control and, turn or hit a first time pass themselves. So I do think there's a little bit to work there on communication, but I think most of it is actually a sign of his talent. And I actually think he still has the opportunity to be a player for a decent player for us. And I absolutely wouldn't rush to conclusions that he's definitely, for example, going to be leaving the club this summer. I would absolutely like him to stay. Um, it would be, I think he'd be a great player for the League Cup campaign and the FA Cup campaign. But obviously, the point of that isn't just for him to do that. It is that if he proves himself good enough and he's got the fitness levels, then that could extend into the Europa League campaign or at the very highest, the Premier League, obviously. So then we'll go on to our fan favourite, Luke O'Nien. Absolutely love Luke O'Nien. What a signing he was from Wycombe Wanderers when they just won League Two. A good long time ago now. Look, we'll all know what Luke's about. Luke is a dedicated player to the highest level. He is funny. He's charismatic. As he plays as a centre back now, he's not traditionally what you'd expect from a centre back, certainly in terms of his size and height. You think he's about around 5'11", when usually the traditional benchmark and usually class for when you're expecting what the height of centre back would be is at 6 foot and over. But the improvement from his early days into now, especially since we got promoted to the Championship, is just exceptional. And his ability to learn to get better at every part of his game is just brilliant, to the point now where, and yes, he will never have the pace or the level of technical control that a lot of our other players have. He has massively compensated that for intelligence, mentality, reading of the game. But certain things, like, I often think he's been able to keep a cool head, especially in the younger days in front of goal. But what I think is the most impressive about him now is his range of passing. I watch Luke O'Nien in a lot of the warm ups before we play, and even in the games and towards the end of the Premier League season last year, but also in the Championship the year before, some of the range of that passing and the accuracy he hits it with. I only look in our team at people like Enzo Lafay and Granit Xhaka, who are actually able or executing passes sometimes of the quality that he is, especially long ones. And I think it is very useful, some of Luke O'Nien's long passes out from the back, to get us out of periods of intense pressure at times. Um, yeah, so I'm trying to think if there's anything else really to comment on Luke O'Nien. He speaks for himself mainly. He's a club legend, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. Yes, absolutely wonderful player. Love him. Love him to stay on. Right, so I've decided, by the way, I'm definitely only going to do actually the defenders in this one, because it takes quite a long time to get through all these people. And yeah, so I've got 5 more defenders to do, and then I'll definitely have to separate them before I do the rest of the team. Right, so the next one will be Nordi Mukiele. So Nordi Mukiele, an absolute brilliant signing, a one that I didn't expect us to make, certainly, last season, but I was very happy when we did. I think my appreciation of Nordi Mukiele has grown over the course of the season. He's an absolute physical monster. He's really quick. He's good in the air. He's proactive. He's assertive. Even though he looks like more like a centre back, I think, with possibly slight limits in his, let's say, traits as a modern fullback, where you've got a lot of people. I'm not sure about modern fullback really, actually, because I think I was going to say previously, I think a lot of fullbacks have been known to be required to be a lot better on the ball, maybe even excel at dribbling, be able to constantly overlap and get brilliant crosses into the box, which, not gonna lie, Nordi Mukiele does deliver on a fairly reasonable basis. Um, but that's kind of what my praise is, if you get what I mean. You might not, for him, is that despite not having the traditional profile of one, and possibly what I'd say is more of a centre back's profile, he really does manage to deliver all the time because of his relentless work rate, his intelligence with the ball at his feet, so he knows what to do at the right times. Obviously, his pace and power, but he's proven to be a huge goal threat. I mean, last season I think he got a I might be wrong here, but I think he got the most goal contributions out of any of our defenders. That might partially be because Dan Ballard was injured a lot of the time, but no, I absolutely love Noni Mukiele. Huge player if we can hold on to him. Up there with some of our most important players. Versatile, gets the fans off their seat. Absolute joy of a player to watch. Which moves us on to our Paraguayan centre half, Omar Alderete. I love Omar Alderete. We got him from an absolute steal price from Getafe, as their owner admitted themselves. He's 29 years old now, and Mukiele, I think, is 28, to be fair. He's not a player that's at the early part of his career, but he's certainly not a player right at the end of it as well. So I think it was certainly a very good price. The main thing with Alderete that is so impressive is how brilliant his left foot is. And he certainly does have that bit of flair that I was talking about, maybe people like Dan Ballard not having, where he is definitely unpredictable. And again, especially earlier in the season, I think he made some absolutely brilliant passes, which no one saw coming, which made him look like he had the technique more of a number 10 rather than the position he actually plays in at centre half. He does have some issues, and Regis has mentioned this himself, where I'd say possibly he was slightly more extremity than Seal when he is, again, so good on the ball that he sometimes gets relaxed on it and needs a little bit of a zap. And reminder that he needs to keep the intensity and keep focused all the time, because he is absolutely fantastic at the passes he is able to do. Probably needs to pick his moments a little bit better than he did in the second half of last season, but I've got absolute faith that he can do that, and he could do that and still provide passes that the fans will just be in awe of, throughout the rest of the time he's here, because he's generally so good at it, and he gets into positions where he can deliver. He can deliver really great crosses. I mean, we saw it. I think is the first game of the season against West Ham. I think he got the assist for one of the goals, or he certainly got the cross in that ended up going for it. So that was great. He's not particularly the fastest, but he's very good in duels, decent in the air. No complaints there. Reinildo Mandava is the next one. Proper defender. I think he was definitely a good signing we got from Atletico Madrid. We previously had Dennis Sirkin in the left-back position, who has unfortunately left us now. Dennis was one of my favourite players, I'm going to be honest with you. But he did have a long injury record, and I respect that. I think he wanted to try and find what a long-term solution was for his career moving forward. And I don't know whether we were offering him the opportunity to do that or not in a way that suited him and his family. So that is what it is. Proper defender, Reinildo. Very good in the challenge. Very relentless in the way he harangues attackers that come towards him. He has a really good work rate. You can tell, I think, that he's lost a little bit of the pace that he previously had in some of his other years, because I remember when we first signed him, we got references of how rapid he was and stuff, and he is still, don't get me wrong, fairly quick and can outpace certainly a lot of other fullbacks or general players, but you can tell he's possibly slightly lacking that little bit of burst of pace to move away from a player, certainly once he's beat them now. and he sometimes finds himself running himself out of play a bit, or having to turn back around and then lay the pass back off. But in general, he's quite tidy and reliable. He doesn't take too many risks where he doesn't need to from his passing. The only criticism on the ball I'd have with Reynaldo is, I think when it comes to the attacking play, there's definitely players that can offer more from that position, because I don't think he's provided a great quality of cross this season, and I don't think he's crossed that much. So I'm assuming it's just a lot of it's just his. It's not the preference of his game. He certainly seems to me someone who is more accomplished as a defensive player than he is as an attacking player. But he's been hugely important for us last season, and I know he will be for us this season as well, when we need to compete on so many fronts. And if there's someone certainly I wanted on the pitch to help us secure a hard fought win, then Reynaldo would want to be the first people that I'd want on the pitch for that. That brings us on to new signing. First new signing of the summer, Thomas Meunier. I was really glad that we made this signing. As I've talked about previously, I think that he is an extremely versatile player, as he said in his interview, which I was also really impressed with, just the level of ambition he was talking about that he had there. He's been an absolute mainstay in the Belgian national team for, I think, over a decade now. Certainly as far back as I remember watching Belgium. He's played for some huge clubs across Europe, PSG, Borussia Dortmund and Lille. He is on the older side, certainly. He's older than Granit Xhaka, actually. But I think it's great that he says that he's not ready at this point to settle for somewhere where the competition isn't at the highest level. And no, I watched him in this World Cup, and that's obviously the most important thing, how he's performing right now. Played a lot of games for Lille last year, and at the World Cup, I saw a really tall, strong, dedicated, smart, tidy player. And he said it himself in his interview that he likes to keep it simple. And no, I think this is probably a good move for us. In terms of both dressing room leadership and experience, helping other players on, like Trai Hume, who's the last player I'm going to talk about in this video. And no, I think it's going to be a really good acquisition for us. Finally, because I only have 2 minutes left on this video, because I'm trying to keep them under 30 minutes in general, I will talk about Trai Hume. And this might be a little bit cut short because of me keeping the video shorter, mainly because I've actually set it up, preset this for 30 minutes, so I can't extend it. So that is a bit of a shame. He was a player we signed for absolute peanuts when we were in League One. And I see Trai Hume as an old school right back. He is more what I think you'd expect of a right back from one of the big teams like Man United in the 1990s and early 2000s. He is extremely tough in the tackle. He is very dedicated, quite no nonsense, doesn't do too much talking. He's quite a quiet lad by the seams of it. I think he's very, very tactically aware, which is part of why he's used so often by Regis Lebris, despite what position he plays him in, whether that's an 8, a 6. We've seen him play at centre half, we've seen him play at right back, and we've seen him play on the right wing. Undoubtedly, for me, his best position is right back or a right-hand side of a back three, because he is despite him being under 6 foot, like Luke O'Nien, he has an incredibly high. In fact, I think I saw that out of the top 5 leagues in Europe, Trai Hume was in the top 1 percentile of fullbacks for aerial duels won last season, which, given someone who's about the size of me, certainly physically stronger though, and I'm only 5'11" as well, that is pretty incredible, given some of the other players that play in that position. For example, even like Nordi Mukiele, which apparently Trai Hume has better aerial duel wins ratio than him. So that's an absolutely huge thing for him. And I'd say he's not the most eye-catching player of the things that he can do on the ball. But as I say, his tactical awareness and I think his passing and his crossing are getting better over time, which part of that will be coming with his sometimes him, especially the crossing, sometimes being stationed higher up that pitch.